had suddenly been wiped clean of 7 o'clock a.m. alignment calls and 8 o'clock p.m. crisis mitigation Zoom meetings. It was disorienting, like stepping off a treadmill that had been running at sprint speed for 10 years. But then the rage kicked in, not the hot, messy kind that makes you key a car, but the cold, crystalline kind that makes you topple a regime. I had to go back one last time. HR protocols. The exit interview farce. I dressed for a funeral, all black, severe lines, lipstick the color of a fresh arterial wound. When I walked into the lobby of Archer & Co., the receptionist, a sweet kid named Jason, looked like he was about to cry. "Miss DeWitt," he whispered, It's chaos upstairs." Madison ordered a kombucha tap for the break room, but she accidentally canceled the Bloomberg terminal subscriptions to pay for it. "Priorities, Jason," I said, breezing past security. The elevator ride up was the longest 30 seconds of my life. When the doors opened on the 40th floor, the atmosphere had shifted. It wasn't the hum of productivity anymore, it was the buzz of nervous energy. People were huddled in cubicles, whispering. When they saw me, the whispers stopped dead. I walked down the hallway like I owned the mortgage on the building. Madison was in my office. She hadn't even waited for me to clear my things. She was sitting in my ergonomic chair, spinning back and forth, talking loudly on speakerphone. "No, I don't care about the legacy accounts, Tyler. They're so. Umer Energy, we need to pivot to crypto or NFTs. Are those still a thing?" She saw me and stopped spinning. She didn't look ashamed. She looked annoyed that I was interrupting her visioning. "Oh, hey, Allison," she chirped. "I was just vibing in here. The feng shui is way better than my cubicle. Hope you don't mind." Richard said it was cool. "It's all yours, Madison," I said, my voice flat. "I'm just here for my files." "Totally," she said, waving a hand. "Take whatever." "Oh, and hey, no hard feelings, right? Uncle Richard said you were totally chill about it." "Totally chill." I looked at her, really looked at her. She was a child playing dress up in a burning building. "No hard feelings," I lied. "Just a word of advice, Madison. Watch the Q4 projections. The spreadsheet has a macro that auto-updates from the legal server. If you break the link, the SEC compliance triggers a red flag." Her eyes glazed over. "Macro, is that like diet thing? Something like that." I walked over to the filing cabinet. This was the moment, the setup. I unlocked the bottom drawer. Inside wasn't a stash of snacks or gym clothes. It was my in case of emergency leverage, but I didn't take it all. I took the personal items, my Rolodex of private contacts, the hard drive with my intellectual property. But I left one thing behind. A single, slate-gray folder placed conspicuously on the empty desk surface was labeled Internal Audit and Governance Gaps, 2020 to 2024. Inside that folder was a memo I had written 6 months ago, detailing several procedural anomalies in how Richard handled vendor contracts. It wasn't illegal yet, it was just sloppy, dangerous. The kind of thing a competent CSO would read, panic over, and fix immediately to protect the CEO. Madison wouldn't read it, or if she did, she wouldn't understand it. She'd probably use the back of the pages to sketch logo ideas, but someone else would find it eventually. And when they did, it would be proof that the issues were known, documented, and ignored. "Are you going to take the plant?" Madison asked, pointing to my dying fiddle leaf fig. "No," I said. "It needs sunlight and attention. I don't think it'll survive the new administration." I walked out of the office, leaving the folder there like a loaded gun on a coffee table. I went straight to HR. Linda was sweating. "Allison, Richard wants to do the exit interview himself," she said, wringing her hands. "No," I said, "standard forms only. I sign the NDA regarding trade secrets, I take my accrued vacation pay, and I leave. If Richard wants to talk to me, he can speak to my attorney." You have an attorney? "I'm a strategist, Linda. I always have a contingency." I signed the papers. I didn't glance at the non-compete clause because I knew it was unenforceable in New York if the resignation was under constructive dismissal pretenses, which giving my job to a niece arguably was. But I wasn't going to fight them in court for a settlement. That was too small, too petty. I wanted the kingdom. Or rather, I wanted to watch the kingdom burn so I could roast marshmallows over the embers. As I walked to the elevator, Richard burst out of his corner office. "Allison," he shouted. He looked disheveled. "Don't be dramatic. Come back inside. We can create a role for you, senior advisor to the CSO. We'll keep your salary the same." I turned and looked at him. The audacity was breathtaking. He wanted me to be the brain while Madison wore the crown. He wanted me to do the work while she took the credit, all for the low price of my dignity. "Richard," I said, loud enough for the bullpen to hear, "I don't do advisor. And I certainly don't do babysitting. You wanted a new direction? You got it. Enjoy the view." The elevator doors closed on his red, sputtering face. I walked out of the building with nothing but my purse and a single locked file folder tucked under my arm. It felt light. But the weight of what I was carrying in my head, the codes, the clauses, the buried bodies, was heavy enough to crush them all. I wasn't unemployed. I was just freelance. My first project was the demolition of Archer & Co. To understand how I was going to gut Richard, you have to go back 3 years. It was a rainy November in 2021. We were courting Greenpoint Capital, a private equity firm with pockets deeper than the Marianas Trench and a reputation for being about as warm and fuzzy as a velociraptor. We needed their money to scale. They needed a mid-market firm with high potential. It was a match made in capitalism. The negotiations were brutal. Greenpoint sent their lead counsel, a man named Gordon Vane. Gordon was a legend. He didn't argue, he just stared at you until you questioned your own existence. Richard was terrified of him. Richard liked deals that happened on golf courses with handshakes and scotch. Gordon liked deals that happened in windowless rooms with 400-page contracts and blood oaths. I was the point person on the deal structure. Richard couldn't be bothered with the boring legal stuff, so he delegated the redlining to me and our in-house counsel, a guy named Dave who was mostly there to make sure we didn't accidentally sell the building. It was 2:00 a.m. on the final night of negotiations. The conference room smelled like stale pizza and high-stakes desperation. Gordon was sitting across from me, looking fresh as a daisy. I was running on caffeine and spite. "We need a safeguard," Gordon said, tapping his Montblanc pen on the table. "Greenpoint isn't in the business of funding vanity projects. If leadership fails, we need a trigger to protect our investment." Dave, our lawyer, bristled. "We can't give you a board majority. Richard won't sign it. He needs to maintain control." Gordon looked at me. He knew I was the one actually building the model. "Allison, thoughts?" I looked at the draft. I knew Richard. I knew he was getting lazy. I knew he was already talking about bringing family into the business. And I knew that if things went south, I would be the one expected to fix it with no authority. I saw an opening. "What if we add a conditional clause?" I suggested, keeping my voice steady. "Not a board majority by default, but a competency trigger. If specific KPIs, EBITDA, retention, compliance, drop below a certain threshold for 2 consecutive quarters, or if there is a material breach of governance protocols, Greenpoint gets temporary voting override to restructure the C-suite." Dave frowned. "Richard won't like restructure. Call it strategic realignment capability," I said. "He loves the word strategic. He won't read the definition." Gordon's eyes narrowed. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. He saw exactly what I was doing. I was building a fire escape for the investors and a trapdoor for the CEO. "Article 7D, Gordon said, a small, terrifying smile touching his lips. "Strategic realignment due to governance failure or material mismanagement." We drafted it right there. The language was dense, buried in the middle of page 142 of the shareholder rights agreement. It defined material mismanagement broadly, including hiring of unqualified executive personnel without independent board review and gross negligence regarding compliance reporting. The next morning, Richard breezed in to sign the final documents. He was hungover, wearing sunglasses indoors. "Did we get the valuation we wanted?" he asked, hovering the pen over the signature line. "Yes," I said. "We got the money. And I still have 51% voting rights. As long as the company performs, Richard." I said, "It's all standard." "Great. Boring legal mumbo-jumbo," he laughed and scrawled his signature. He didn't read a single word, he didn't even flip the page. He was too busy thinking about the press release. Gordon shook Richard's hand, but he looked at me. There was a moment of silent acknowledgement. A nod. Game recognized game. That document, the shareholder rights agreement, was currently sitting in a vault at Greenpoint Capital. Richard had a copy in his office safe, probably under a stack of Golf Digest magazines. He had forgotten Article 7D existed. But I hadn't. Article 7D wasn't just a clause, it was a kill switch. And Madison, with her kombucha taps and her complete lack of regulatory knowledge, wasn't just pressing buttons in the cockpit. She was dancing on the launch codes. All I had to do was wait for the material mismanagement to become undeniable. And based on what I had seen in her first 24 hours, I wouldn't have to wait long. I had the map. I knew where the mines were buried. Now, I just had to watch them step on every single one. It took exactly 3 weeks for the wheels to come off. I wasn't surprised by the crash, I was surprised by the velocity. It was like watching a toddler try to pilot a Boeing 747, tragic, terrifying, and impossible to look away from. I was sitting in my apartment, wearing sweatpants that cost less than my old dry cleaning bill, sipping coffee and watching the stock ticker. Archer & Co. was holding steady, but the internal chatter on LinkedIn and Blind, the anonymous corporate gossip app, was a 5-alarm fire. New CSO just banned Excel because it's not visually inspiring. We have to submit budgets in Canva now. Anonymous employee, is it normal for strategy meetings to start with a vibe check and end with a group chant? Asking for a friend who wants to quit. Verified Archer employee Madison was busy disrupting. Her first major initiative was something called Project Neon. From what I could gather from my former contacts, who were texting me frantically at all hours, Project Neon was a complete rebrand of our core B2B service offerings. Archer & Co. made its money providing boring, reliable logistics analytics to boring, reliable manufacturing firms. Madison decided this was stale. She wanted to pivot to lifestyle logistics. She fired the external compliance auditing firm, a company we had used for 7 years to ensure our data handling met federal privacy standards. Why? Because, I quote from a leaked email forwarded to me by a terrified junior analyst, Their logo is ugly, and their lead auditor gives me bad energy. We're going with this boutique agency my friend Tyler runs. They do crypto consulting, but they're super agile. That was strike one. Firing a certified auditor for a crypto consultant friend wasn't just stupid, it was a potential breach of our data security covenants. Strike two came in the form of the vendor town hall. Usually, I handled these. I would present the quarterly roadmap, reassure our suppliers, and talk about supply chain resilience. Madison decided to turn it into a vision quest. She showed up 20 minutes late, wearing a headset microphone like she was doing a TED talk. She didn't have slides. She had a mood board. We're moving away from rigid contracts, she told a room full of steel manufacturers and shipping magnates. We want our partnership to flow like water. We want to operate on trust and blockchain vibes. The suppliers, men and women who dealt in tonnage and tariffs, stared at her blankly. Then the questions started. Does this mean you're changing the payment terms? Payment terms are so binary, Madison replied. We're looking at dynamic value exchange. Translation, we aren't going to pay you on time. Within 48 hours, 3 major vendors paused their shipments. They cited uncertainty regarding fiscal governance. I sat in my living room, downloading every report, every leaked email, every panicked text message. I wasn't just gossiping, I was building a dossier. I had a folder on my laptop titled The Fall. It contained 1. The email firing the auditor. 2. The transcript of the vendor town hall, recorded by a loyalist in the AV booth. 3. A screenshot of Madison's new organizational chart, which eliminated the risk management department and replaced it with a brand evangelist team. But the cherry on top was the Q3 financial revision. Because Madison didn't understand the macro I warned her about, she had manually entered revenue projections into the master deck. She added a 0, just one little 0. Instead of projecting 4% growth, she projected 40%. She presented this to the internal leadership team. Richard, desperate for a win, didn't check the math. He signed off on it. They sent the preliminary guidance to the investors, including Greenpoint Capital. It was fraud, accidental, incompetent fraud, but fraud nonetheless. In the corporate world, stupidity is not a legal defense. I looked at the document on my screen. The 40% growth slide. It was in a font called Papyrus. Oh, Madison, I whispered to the empty room. You just handed me the gun. It was time. I didn't want to go back to Archer & Co. I didn't want my job back. I wanted justice. And justice in my world wore a bespoke suit and carried a very thick briefcase. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 3 years. Gordon Vane's office, the assistant answered. This is Allison DeWitt, I said. Tell Gordon I have an update on Article 7D, and tell him to bring the good wine. The wine bar was called El Aubly, the Oblivion. Fitting. It was dark, expensive, and quiet enough to plan a murder or a hostile takeover. I was sitting in a corner booth, a glass of Sansera untouched in front of me. On the table sat the physical copy of my dossier, bound in nondescript black leather. Gordon Vane walked in at 7:05 p.m. He hadn't aged a day since the deal 3 years ago. He still looked like a shark that had learned to walk upright and wear Tom Ford. He slid into the booth opposite me, his eyes scanning the room for eavesdroppers before locking onto mine. Allison, he said, his voice a low rumble, you look rested. Unemployment suits you. Consulting, Gordon, I corrected. I'm a free agent, of course, and I assume this meeting isn't just to catch up on old times? He gestured to the black binder. I hear you received the preliminary Q3 guidance from Archer & Co. Yesterday, I said, skipping the pleasantries. Gordon nodded, taking a sip of the water the waiter had placed. Aggressive numbers. Richard is bullish. 40% growth in a stagnating logistics market? It's a miracle, it's a typo, I said. Gordon froze. The glass hovered halfway to his mouth. Excuse me? I slid the binder across the table. Open to tab 3. He opened it. He saw the side-by-side comparison. My original model showing 4% growth, and Madison's Project Neon slide showing 40%, with the manual entry clearly highlighted. She broke the formula link, I explained. She thought the cell looked lonely, so she typed in a number that felt right. Richard signed off on it without an audit because he's too busy trying to convince the board that Madison is a prodigy. Gordon stared at the page. His jaw tightened. If this is true, they just submitted false guidance to a majority shareholder. That's securities fraud. It's material mismanagement, I said, emphasizing the phrase we both knew by heart. Turn to tab 4. Tab 4 was the email chain regarding the firing of the compliance auditor and the hiring of Tyler's crypto and consulting shack, or whatever it was called. Gordon read it. He read it again. He closed his eyes for a brief moment as if praying for patience. She fired Deloitte for a vibe mismatch, and she replaced them with an uncertified entity owned by a personal friend, I added. That triggers the vendor integrity clause in the investment agreement. It's a breach of covenant, Gordon. He closed the binder. He placed his hand on top of it, claiming it. The shark smelled blood. Why are you giving me this, Allison? He asked, studying my face. You want the CEO chair? Is that the play? We invoke 7D, decapitate Richard, and install you as the savior? I took a sip of my wine. It was crisp, cold, perfect. No, I said, I don't want the chair. I don't want to fix the mess she made. I've spent 10 years fixing Richard's messes. I'm done being the janitor.